I have to say, the animated series still has one of my favorite Lois Lane moments, which is one where she's on Air Force One, I want to say, that's being hijacked. And they go, "Who are you?" "Lois Lane." "Wait, the same Lois Lane that Superman keeps rescuing?" Oh, crap.
Yeah. That's when the character of Lois Lane was dead. You killed her off right there.
Yeah, but it's like, take the fact that she's there mostly to get saved by Superman and run with it.
Well, it was like
they just run it into the ground too. Well, that's where it really just.
Well, it was like one of the best lines on Buffy was toward the end, where I think Buffy says, "Wait a minute, so Dawn's been kidnapped? Oh, it must be Tuesday." It's
sounds
true.
Normal.
It's true. Yeah. You take something that could be a flaw or whatever, and you turn it around. It's called you put a lampshade on it. You draw attention to it, and you at least acknowledge it and make fun
now
of it.
I'm just thinking of Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged and the jokes with Pokemon getting kidnapped, and then finally he compares them to all his other kidnappers. Well, this one gave me ice cream.
I'll say the thing I always find the most interesting with Superman, they're supposed to be working on a movie about it. Have you guys heard of, do you know the story of the Clan of the Fiery Cross?
I actually do not.
Okay, so there's back when it was a radio show, 30s, 40s, there's a reporter who did a whole bunch of research and was looking for a way to get it out to the public. So he wound up approaching the writers of Superman, and they created
he did more than research. He was actually undercover.
Yeah, he went undercover.
Spy Kids mission.
And
with like the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
With the Ku Klux Klan, they based the episode on his research, and it's everyone was expecting the Klan to get a huge resurgence in membership at the time because it was just after World War I want to say.
Yeah.
And he that show is almost single-handedly given credit for killing its chances of having a revival at that time.
If anybody out there wants the full story, you can then look up Drunk History, which is a Comedy Central show where a bunch of comedians get drunk and tell historical stories.
Isn't it funny that we
that
get
sounds
most
like a
of
night
our...
here, right, Gino?
You can also find the whole radio sequence on YouTube.
Yeah, isn't it sad that we live in a day and age where we get most of our more reputable news from comedians and comedy shows?
Oh my God, yo! If you want news, tune in to Bonner and Burrito Sunday at 8:30 p.m.
Exactly.
You know, that's one thing I like about their shows. They actually talk about things that are going on in the world, even though they
they give their own perspective on it, and they rip it to shreds, which I find hilarious. I've beat myself back there multiple times.
Well, history is also just absolutely fascinating, given how much of it we're either not taught or taught wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you look it up, you realize how contradicting it is.
You know, that actually reminds me of something. So, John Leguizamo has a new show on Broadway called Latin History for Morons. And it actually teaches you about things that they don't teach you in school.
Yeah. No, he's a very smart comedian.
He's a very smart
John Leguizamo's got the new For Dummies book out. It's called Latin History.
No, but it's such a good show.
I would buy that book.
And you learn so much about it.
On the paranormal front, there's actually one of the most common complaints paranormal people like me get from skeptics is, well, it's never produced any scientific results, which is actually provably untrue.
Yeah, that's false.
In two major circumstances.
Watch Ghost Adventures. Just kidding.
Actually, no, that was the question I was going to ask. How do you guys feel about the show Ghost Adventures?
I have a personal rule of not commenting on other paranormal groups because the thing
I have no such rule. I think it's garbage.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not doing it from a paranormal investigator standpoint. You're doing it from a TV show consumer.
Exactly. Something. The paranormal community is full of a bunch of, I hesitate to say crybabies, but we'll go with crybabies because it's appropriate.
Okay.
And it's easy to get in a whole lot of political BS. I've been down that road. I've been there. I've done that. I've sold the T-shirts. I don't want to go there again.
Although we can quote our guest from last week has been on some of those shows, and he pretty much came right out and said, "Yeah, 90% of it is faked. Like they have a script that they work from. Because you can't produce." Real results, real stuff every week.
Yeah.
And as I said, and then what fascinates me is that sometimes they'll actually go into a legit haunted house
and still fake stuff.
And they won't film the real stuff. And they'll film the fake stuff and completely ignore the real stuff that's happening right in front of them.
Because the real stuff isn't as telegenic.
Like it's not as cool.
I think it's because they have to do it on the fly.
Well, it's not just, it's that too, but the thing you run into is most of those shows specialize in what I would call human spirit hauntings or classic ghosts.
Okay.
Ghost activity is, I hate to say it for all the ghost hunters out there and wannabe ghost hunters out there, it's boring. You can spend
comparatively to what you do.
6 to 12 months in a house with a human spirit waiting to hear footsteps one time.
No, jeez.
Yeah, whereas
how boring that'll get.
With the demonic, oh good heavens, all the things that can happen.
Well, yeah.
But there's all sorts of other reasons why you don't want to put that on TV all the time.
All right.
I want a Dr. Seuss book now about demonic hauntings. That's like, the places you'll go. Oh, the places you'll go by Kevin Mears, and with drawing, like Dr. Seuss style drawings. And I just we need to do this. Let's get a Kickstarter.
How are you with rhyming?
I can do pretty good rhymes.
Then maybe we should collaborate.
I was gonna say you've written 3 books. I think you can handle a couple Dr. Seuss rhymes.
The question. I'm a fine
writer. Those words are made up.
Seuss is actually a really good writer. It's very tough to copy his style.
It's well crafted, the rhymes.
Yeah. It looks easy, but it's actually tough when you study it.
When you any kind of rhyming is just hard.
Yes.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I hope you can make a little bit of humor out of it if you're waiting for footsteps for 6 to 12 hours.
6 to 12 months.
Oh, months. Sorry.
And that's also, like I said, I don't specialize in human spirit cases. When I get involved, it gets crazier.
Okay,
what do you specialize in?
Well, as I said, my proper title is demonologist.
Yeah, give them the whole spiel.
Okay.
To quote it in the simplest terms, my mentor, the late Lou Gentili, would have said that we're not the people you call because you hear the footsteps in the hallway at night. We're the people you call because you're in a hotel room too afraid to go home.
Okay.
I've worked cases where one of the most horrible cases I ever had, a woman was pushed to the point of suicide. Things were so terrible in her house every night.
Yeah, that's a creepy story. If you want to go there, he can tell you the whole story, but it is not a nice story.
Tell me the story.
Oh
okay.
God, I want to hear this.
So, way back, late 90s.
Okay.
I start working with this guy, Lou Gentili, and he gives me a call in the 2 o'clock, 12, somewhere 12 to 2 in the afternoon. He goes, "I got a case. You available?" Now, this was his way of doing things. It was no notice, no warning, just are you available in an hour's notice?
Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, let me see what I can do. I need to call out of work.
Okay.
So I called work and I made up an excuse. Because oddly, I have to go demon hunting isn't a good excuse. For most employers.
I just don't accept that. I don't know why.
I have to go fuck this demon up.
And we drive out. Now, Lou lived in Philadelphia, and we drove together, so we left from his place. This place was out in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which, under ideal circumstances, is about a 3.5-hour drive.
Wow.
Given the weather conditions, we probably drove through the beginning of a tornado. And the fact that he was driving his work truck, it took us about 5 hours.
Oh
what timing?
We get out there. This older guy. And this guy is like, so I'll wake up in the night and I'll feel creatures on the bed with me. Poking him, prodding him, pulling his hair. Really bizarrely, like fingers pushing into his ears and then pushing down inside of his body. Hands underneath his skin, rubbing the muscles.
Oh my gosh.
And then very, very late at night, usually close to 4, this huge weight will settle on him. He can't move, he can't breathe, and then eventually it'll go away. Every night. So we set up an infrared video camera in this guy's bedroom. And sort of scientifically, it's like, okay, we're going to set this up, we're going to run a feed out to a monitor, we're going to have you go to bed, and see what happens. We do all this. He complains they're here. We watch the bed that he's laying on. Footsteps appear, walking down from the edge of the bed towards him. What's moving is about the size of a cat. Looks like about the size of the cat. The size of the feet, the amount of indentation. There's 2 problems with the cat theory. The first one is it's only clearly it's 2 feet. So whatever it is a biped. You know, it walks like a person.
It's a midget.
And I'm 41. I've seen my share of cats. This is the only time I've ever seen an invisible one.
Wow.
We could see the bed moving. We couldn't see what was moving it.
Okay.
So the part that we've been alluding to, but I've avoided saying outright for dramatic purposes, is this didn't start with this guy. It started with his wife.
Okay.
And
Everything
it moved to his guy?
What?
And it moved to the guy?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'll get to how and why in a second. Everything I just described is happening to his wife, but not to him. She tells him he thinks she's crazy, takes her to a psychiatrist. She tells the local priest. The priest thinks she's crazy. The psychiatrist thinks she's crazy. Her sister is the only person who believes her, and they're desperately trying to find some sort of help. One night, while on medication, she wakes up in the middle of the night, goes to a cabinet, drives to the grocery store where she worked, puts the gun in her mouth, and pulls the trigger.
Oh my god.
The next night, the next day, cops are at his door. Or actually, as he told us, oddly enough, the cops were in his house. Tell him what happened. And the next night, everything she described started happening to him.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Yeah, personally, I always think that with her story, it might have been less what was going on with her and more people didn't believe her. Or that kind of feeling of isolation.
Well, I think it's a combination.
Yeah, when you think you have no alternative, then they get to the real kicker, though, the thing that you actually saw.
Oh yes,
because that's the real.
So I'm sitting on one side of the bed. Well, later in the night, we both move into the room. I'm sitting on one side, Lou's sitting on the other. The guy's laying on the bed. The first thing I see, which is less dramatic, is this bowl of black appears at the top of a trash can, comes down, and then runs into the wall. The 2 interesting things is one, it came off of it, not like it dropped down, but like it was running down. And the second was that it ran into the wall and disappeared, then reappeared and ran off under the bed. The second is I'm looking at Lou across the bed, and like when first you go into a dark room and you get those purplish after images.
Yeah.
Seeing something squatting on the bed. Seeing specifically one of the multiple enemy entities that was causing what's going on. It was about 2 to 3 feet tall, hunched over, long spindly arms and legs, sort of very monkey-like. And then on top of that, 2 large pointed horns and bat-like wings. It looked like, and in fact it was, what we call an imp.
An imp. Okay.
Demons have you could call it hierarchy. I sort of prefer to call it a lowerarchy.
Okay.
Just like, you have angels and archangels and all of that.
Of course.
To give you an idea of scope, imps, the main problem in that house are the weakest form of demonic activity. It can be so much worse than that, and that's how far that case went.
Wow. That's crazy. Whew. I never heard of anything like that happen. Have you ever had any spirit stuff happen to you? I'm talking to you, babe.
I know you were talking to me.
Yeah.
I was on a retreat once. I mean, this isn't more this isn't
I think she was trying to process all that.
No, I honestly thought you were talking to him, not me. No, I was in 8th grade and I was on a retreat. And later this day, I told my mom and dad about it because I felt my aunt's presence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
My aunt died when I was 11. So this was 2 years after her death. I was on a retreat somewhere at this retreat house in Princeton with my 8th grade class. And I remember feeling her presence. Swear to God, I heard her voice.
I believe it.
And later on that night, I went out because it was the way my 8th grade retreat was. Because we had a retreat and then we went to go see the musical that they were putting on in the school. And usually after the 8th grade, after all that's over, you have a sleepover. I wasn't feeling well, so I didn't sleep over. I left.
Mm-hmm.
So I had my parents pick me up, and we went out, and I told them about it. They're like, "Did that really happen?" I'm like, "Yeah." I kid you not. I was even asking my friends, "Did you guys hear that?" They're like, "No." But they had no idea what I was talking about.
I can't even tell you what happened.
Yeah, that's not actually
this
very
is
uncommon.
really common. Yeah. Incredibly common. One, I forget her first name, Dr. Kubler-Ross, the woman who wrote
Yes.
On Death and Dying. Yeah, that landmark book that introduced the idea of the 5 stages of grief. There's a whole other chapter that was written about experiences like that was never published.
Really?
Because years before the whole near-death experience thing became a household term, she's this woman, and she's an absolutely amazing woman, and I recommend people check out her story in her book. She's since passed, but she went into hospitals and hospices and visited people who were on death's door in a time when nobody was doing that, where the dead were left to die in a part of the hospital, and everybody sort of ignored them because they didn't know how to deal with it. And she recorded some of the first examples of near-death experiences, examples of hospital staff seeing a man come in and visit a boy who was sick and dying and leave. And then they described the guy very clearly to the boy's parents, and it's his grandfather who died before he was born.
Wow.
So when there are broadly 3 categories of spirit, although the more I think about it, there probably should be 4. That you have human spirits, which is a bit of a misnomer, but it's spirits that are tied to the natural world. Spirits of people, spirits of animals, spirits of nature, fairies. We could go on all night. And then you have the other 2 types of categories are what we call inhuman spirits, which are your holy angels, angels that serve God, and there are other types of spirits that are associated with heaven that aren't angels, which is where I'm going with this. And then there's unholy, fallen angels, which are your demons and your devils.
Yeah. So like imps, maybe?
Yeah, imps are a type of fallen angel. Now, among the spirits in heaven, when people think of ghosts, you think of somebody dies, they have unfinished business, and they stick around, which is pretty much how ghosts happen. But there's another classification of spirit that when someone dies that you're very, very close to, aunts, parents, grandparents, sisters, brothers, they pass on. They aren't stuck with unfinished business the way that a ghost is. But the door of death is not a one-way door. People that care about us who've died come back to visit.
Okay. So
and then they go back to wherever they go.
They go in and out pretty much?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which kind of makes a lot of sense. It's like, if heaven's supposed to be perfect, why are you stuck there?
Yeah. No, that's actually very true. And I never thought about that either, so thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
Yeah. Yo. But I actually remember at your mom's funeral back when she passed away last year.
Yeah.
I feel like I had an experience like that. I think I told you.
What was it?
Like, you know, when we were like all like still like in the funeral, like towards
like in the pews.
Yeah, like maybe like in the middle of it when like the sun was out and like at the end like the sun like started going like the other way.
Yeah.
And it almost felt like your mom was like coming to visit, and then towards the end she was leaving.
Really?
Did I tell you about that? Does that make sense?
I
to you
remember.
Oh yeah, this is
remember
also
feeling
very. How many days? How many days? Out of curiosity, not that it's necessarily relevant. How many days between when she died and the funeral? Do you remember offhand?
There was about 5 days.
She died December 5th.
There's
the
an
funeral was
old
the 10th.
belief, and there's a fair amount of truth to this, in my experience. When we die, we're given a window. In superstition and various magical theories, it's about 3 days between when we die and when we cross over to make our peace. A lot of people have experiences like that at funerals. I've had a woman by the name of Debbie Chestnut, who we haven't had on here on our show yet, but I've had her on my YouTube channel, and I'll probably try and get her for the show on Hamilton as well, who commented to me once during her interview that when she goes to funeral, she hates going to funerals because the dead person is always there. Usually has a message to pass along, and it's often someone inane. Case in point, I remember her telling me about being at a woman's funeral, and it's like, that's my daughter. You know, tell her I'm okay, and tell her, what are you wearing? I mean, really, come on. It's like fashion advice.
Go
the other
and
side.
all the things you want at a funeral.
Exactly. It's like, so your mom is here and she hates what you're wearing. Just take that with you, okay?
I'm gonna randomly be like, hey babe, what should I wear when you die now?
Oh, you know what? That whole thing that you were talking about, your experience, actually reminded me of that thing that I always tell you about.
Okay.
So 2 months after my mom died, I got a dog. And my dog, like, okay, in the layout of my house, when you enter through the front door, you have our living room, and then you either go to the right, which is the dining room and the rest of the house, or you go upstairs to the bedrooms.
Okay.
In our living room, we have a coffee table, and the coffee table has a little urn with my mom's remains in it.
Mm-hmm.
Her remains are actually split. We have a big urn that's buried in Puerto Rico at our family's plot, and then we have the little urn in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And I started noticing something when I first got the dog, and he still does it now. Is the fact that so that urn is there on our coffee table with a picture of my mother, all that. I'm strongly convinced, because I know animals can sense spirits.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm strongly convinced that the reason why that he's always sitting on that couch. This is like, there's 2 couches in the living room that he sits on one. That's like, this is literally the couch.
Mm-hmm.
That's the table. And I strongly am convinced that he senses my mother's spirit, and that's why he's always over there.
She probably comes back to visit you a lot, and I'd say, because it's absolutely true, animals do sense the spirit world. How they react to it varies, and unfortunately, there's the reality with the sort of cases that I deal with. Demons don't like animals.
Probably because they know they're there a lot of times.
Yeah, and it's that. It's also they don't like people. They just have an inherent hatred for living things.
Okay. What do they hate more? Is there like any? Oh, they hate people more.
The only reasons I can give for it are Christian theological Bible, but the Bible says that we're made in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
Demons are the 2 things demons hate most are God and in any form, and I don't just mean Christianity, and people. And the only reason I've ever really seen it is we're made in the image of God. They hate that. The other big one seems to be that we have physical form. We walk the earth in flesh. They don't. They have never been living creatures.
Okay, that makes sense.
Which is one of the reasons we call them inhuman spirits, is because it's something that has no physical form.
All right.
I have a question. How did you guys get into this?
I was planning to ask them that, but if we are going to
ask
I'm like, well, Kevin's of all of us is the only actual investigator.
I'm like, because we've been talking about this for a good 20, 30 minutes, and I'm like, why have we not asked them how they got involved?
It's one of my most common questions.
Okay.
My answer is much simpler than his.
So when I was a kid,
okay,
I'm 41. I remember growing up and seeing the original, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi in the theaters when they first came out. I also happen to remember seeing another movie that's sort of well known in the 80s called Ghostbusters.
Okay.
I remember that.
Normal people growing up might see, Apollo 13 and go, I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. I saw the movie Ghostbusters and went, I want to be a Ghostbuster when I grow up.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And when you're 10 years old, it's like, oh, that's really cool.
It seems achievable, It's like, why not?
Well, that's what I did. Is I put on my coat, I grabbed a pair of jackets, I rolled up pieces of paper in the form of cigarettes because they smoked throughout the movie.
It was the 80s. Everyone smoked everywhere.
To all of my neighbors and asked them if they had ever seen a ghost. And, before this, I had a fascination with folklore and mythology. After this, I had a bigger fascination with folklore and mythology. And for a long time, it's like, okay, I want to be law enforcement and I want to be a ghost hunter. Law enforcement never happened. Ghost hunting did. Ironically, up until college, I didn't even believe in demons. I just believed there were ghosts and that's it. I always laughed at the demon idea until I met one. And I went, okay, obviously I've been wrong for the last 18 years.
You want to talk to us about the demon you met real quick?
It's not a case I talk about because
he hasn't even told me.
Yeah.
I haven't even heard it.
He's alluded to it many times, but he's never actually.
Wait, you guys are married and he's never told you this?
We're engaged.
But
getting
close
married,
enough.
but he's never told me no.
Yeah.
When you talk
You
about
gotta tell her sometime.
when you talk about certain cases,
He's waiting for his book.
it can bring it back, and that's the big reason I don't talk about it. This was a really bad one.
Ooh.
Yeah, there's certain things that can give entities power. There are names that are one of them.
And recognition, the more attention.
Wow.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, well, it's changing subject.
Brian's
So my-
much shorter than
my
your
story- My story is much easier. I've never seen a ghost. I've never dealt with anything paranormal.
You're sort of afraid of it.
I'm kind of terrified. Like, I don't like ghost stories. I don't like when people tell ghost stories.
Three vampire stories on the table.
Exactly. I do vampires. I'm terrified of ghosts. Like, I
Okay.
never want to actually see one, but I've heard, about it. But I never, it was never my thing. I happened to be at a convention doing a lecture on vampires in folklore and how they made the transition into literature and then film. That
Same
was my
lecture,
thing.
same convention.
Yeah. He showed up as like an audience member and asked a bunch of really intelligent questions. And after it was over, we got to talking, and he was telling me about what he did and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. That's really cool. And he was like, yeah, I'm doing a panel tomorrow. You should come and check it out. I'm like, okay, cool. You came to mine. I'll come and check yours out. And we just wound up, it was one of those things where we kept finding ourselves having in between meetings and things at the same time. So we're standing there together and it's kind of like, well, I was going to go get something to eat. And he's like, oh, well, so was I. I was like, all right, well, let's go get something to eat together and we'll hang out. And we wound up hanging out for the whole weekend.
Much the way I met Amish.
Yeah.
Same exact way?
Just kind of totally coincidental. But we just kind of hit it off and both thought, the other was a pretty cool guy. And so we started, just doing little stuff like talking, hanging out, playing role-playing games and stuff. And when this came up, Kevin originally had another co-host that he was planning, this guy from California named Lupus Creepus. But his schedule didn't work out. And he was telling... And he was, well, I don't think it's his real name, but
his name's David, but his YouTube channel, his personality,
but it's a cool name. But
oh no, his name's David.
His real name's David.
The fun one, and I'll give Lupus because he's a good friend of mine the shout out. His channel is called Will It Kill Me, and I personally
sounds hilarious.
Refer to it jokingly. I hopefully he appreciates it as him attempting to commit supernatural suicide.
Yeah.
What?
It's a fun. Yeah, he does all those rituals that you hear about on the urban legends and stuff.
You know what a creepypasta is?
Yes.
All right.
There you
go.
go.
Everybody who doesn't know.
I did not know one.
I know the best description of it, so why don't you give the quick description you usually give?
It's like the stories you used to tell around a campfire on the internet.
Yeah, it's like internet urban legends.
I know two creepypastas.
Yeah.
But there's a subgenre.
Like Bloody Mary and
Well, no, aside from
stuff.
Bloody Mary, I know about the Pokemon thing, the Lavender Town suicide in Japan, and then there's another one about a video game that this guy got sucked into for
There's a ton of them.
I forget what it was, but it was if you stopped playing, this entity would literally get in your face and yell at you and scream. You remember Connor was telling us about
this?
Is
that Sonic to your buddy?
I think
No,
he was,
that's not
but
Sonic
I don't remember the story exactly.
I forget what it was.
Huh.
Wait, what?
I don't think it was Sonic.exe,
There's a famous
was it?
one. It sounds a little familiar to called Sonic.exe.
It might be that.
I think that might be it.
These guys know they're creepy.
And then the guy, all I know is that at the end of it, he wakes up, his monitor's turned off.
Mm-hmm.
He passes out for a few days and wakes up and the monitor's turned off.
I just want to know where it got the name. I'm just picturing somebody sitting there looking at a bowl of fettuccine going, wow, that is some creepy pasta.
Creepy, so.
I'm like, what the hell? Why did you call it creepy pasta?
You know what I can imagine? You remember that meal that we saw from Epic Mealtime earlier today? It's this 1 million calorie lasagna.
Oh, Lord.
I'm like, if that's anything to do with the creepypasta and death, I think you might as well just wrap it in that.
That would be death by pasta.
But no, so
That's a great way to
what it is there's a subgenre of creepypastas called ritual pastas, which are various games and supernatural rituals that are designed to summon spirits, ghosts, demons, etc.
One you may have heard of is Channel Infinity.
Bloody Mary.
No, I actually haven't.
Sci-Fi has done a 2-season series called Channel Infinity. Both the first one was Candle Cove, and the second one is No End House.
No, it was Channel Zero.
Oh, Channel Zero, right? Sorry,
Okay.
channels which are both based on creepypastas. But what
Candle
Lupus
Cove
does is he takes all of these rituals that are usually supposed to kill you, either if you make a single mistake, or sometimes just if you do the ritual. And he does them, films them, and sees what happens.
I can imagine how his YouTube channel ends already.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's
far, so good. He
that's
hasn't
what
even
we're
had
all waiting
anything happen.
for. The final episode will get huge ratings.
Oh,
my God.
When something finally reaches out and kills him on camera, it's going to be
And he
amazing.
said he's okay if he dies as long as they get it on film.
Yeah.
If they don't get it on film, he's not dying.
Well, no, because then it's a waste.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, why did I just die if you didn't get to film?
Why did I do this YouTube channel if I didn't get to die on camera?
Exactly.
It's on hiatus at the moment, but I believe it should be coming back soon, and it is a great channel. I do recommend checking it out.
But so he needed a co-host, and he asked me, and I was like, you know what, I'll do it. And so I changed my work schedule so I could come in, and now I'm sort of the resident skeptic slash color. I mean, you've seen the show, you've seen us
Yeah, you said
do the thing, and basically what I feel my job is to ask the questions that I think the viewers want to ask if they were here.
Okay.
See, what I find really funny is when I first did radio back late 90s, early 2000s, his job was my job. I was the resident
He
skeptic.
started out the
resident,
same way.
well, what about? And now I'm the grumpy old guy that's got the experience, and he's the token skeptic.
Yep. He tried to
And he's older
reversal.
than me, which makes it funnier.
Yeah, we tried to do a EVP session at a convention one time because he was gonna
it's
finally prove to me that this stuff was real, and it didn't work.
I can prove it to him real
He
quick.
tried.
He just doesn't. You don't really want.
Well,
me
I'm
to
just
do
not
it.
going. I'm not going to a haunted house.
Pause. I figured out what that. I literally just found what that creepypasta was.
Oh,
Which one?
JVK1166Z.
Okay.
Yeah,
The
I'm not familiar
Morrowind.
with it.
It's a haunted Morrowind mod.
There's literally like thousands of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a overused genre. I don't even think the website allows you to
do
make
video
any
game
more.
ones based anyone more.
Yeah, what it is
Like I think they also don't do any more lost episodes because that's an overused genre.
Okay.
Yeah, the
yeah,
episode of a famous TV show that only aired once or never aired and is cursed.
the SpongeBob thing.
Yes,
where
that's another
Squidward
creepy
commits
Oh, yeah.
suicide.
Squidward suicide. It's another
Yes,
very
Squidward
famous
suicide.
example.
And
nice.
I personally love Squidward Suicide. There's a lot of problems with it, but I personally love it because knowing the show, it's like if it weren't for those things that kind of made it go a little out there, you could see like this actually happening in the show. Squidward's just that type of guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, now I want to do the one where like Gilligan accidentally summons a demon.
my God.
Just while he's screwing around, he's got this like pentagram made of coconuts and banana leaves, and like accidentally.
That sounds.
Didn't they do that at some point? That show did so many silly things. I mean, Gilligan becomes a vampire at one point.
This sounds like
That was
every
a great
teenager on a
episode.
Ouija board ever.
Granted.
That was a great
How do
episode,
you feel
Gilligan.
about Ouija boards?
Oh, here we go.
Oh, boy.
Don't. Kevin's got a whole monologue about.
Okay, is it legit?
What'd you say, Dave?
How come on Gilligan's Island they never grew a beard? They're on there for
Somehow they
15
managed to
years.
have razors
They're not
all
like
the
us,
time.
Dave.
I've heard of a thing that Gilligan's
I
Island
don't
is
know what it
actually is actually an allegory for the 7 deadly sins.
Yes. And
I've heard that
Gilligan's
one,
Island
too.
Is
That's
Satan.
where
Although
Yeah.
Like
those are-
they're all-
Gilligan is Satan.
They're all trapped in hell. Yeah. See, that's an
Yeah.
awesome version.
But
of
anyway,
Gilligan's Island.
Ouija boards and why they're evil.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to
So
know
the
if it's legit or
first
not.
start, the overwhelming majority of the time, when you use a Ouija board, somebody's pushing it.
Okay.
And what's interesting is most of the time, the person who's pushing it doesn't know they're pushing it. What you have is a phenomenon known as idiomotor effect. It's muscle movements that are outside of your conscious control. It's what causes the planchette on a Ouija board to move. It's what causes pendulums. You tie a crystal to a string and it swings and circles back and forth. That's what makes that move. It's behind a lot of. Dowsing rods are caused by it as well. It's an entirely understood psychological phenomenon. Once in a while, you wind up contacting something. I know people that argue with me, but I will say in my personal experience, it's rarely, if ever, a good thing.
And just reminding myself of it, the last time we used the Ouija board, this was before I met him and knew how evil they were. It was a Halloween party me and my sister were hosting it, and a bunch of our friends, and at some point we brought out the Ouija board. And there was a total of 5 spirits that came through. The first one was very benign. It was somebody's grandma. you're going to inherit your grandfather's crossbow and check for diabetes in the foot.
Okay.
Very
And-
specific message.
That's so random too.
Yeah.
Out of all the things from a Ouija
Or no,
board,
wait,
I've never
four
heard that
ghosts.
one.
Yeah,
The second one and was for me and my sister. It was a mischievous spirit who was pretending to be our dead uncle, but it turned out to
That's
be somebody
funny.
from the Clan MacDonald.
Okay.
Which, if you know the song "Here Comes the Campbells," if you don't, it's a song about how my clan slaughtered their clan in their sleep.
Oh,
So
lovely.
we were like, fair, no harm. Third one was a little weird. It
Oh,
was
good
the
heavens.
spirit of a little girl who wanted the guy intimately.
Oh.
This is slowly getting worse and worse.
Yeah. You will be visited by 3 ghosts, and each one's going to get perverse, more and more perverse. And,
Sounds
Yeah,
like Ebenezer
but-
Scrooge.
yeah.
You're screwed.
But for some odd reason, he didn't want to do anything about it, so can't help him if he doesn't want help.
Yeah.
The fourth one, and we're moving in, the planchette is moving. To all the rest of us, it's gibberish. To our Filipino friend, it's enough to cause her to scream and jump back.
Okay, so it's
What
called
did it
Tagalog.
I don't know.
She
To
never
this day,
translated it?
she never translated it. To this day, I don't know what it was. I have a couple of suspicions.
So do
But
So
I.
it's Tagalog. Okay.
Maybe she doesn't want to remember.
Yeah.
yeah, I have a feeling it's somebody from her past that recently died that was not good to her.
Okay.
Well, I'll give
Gotcha.
you another very well-known example. There is a case, and this is another actually a guest that we're hopefully going to have on our show soon, but his book's worth checking out. But there's a case that happened in the 1940s in St. Louis, Missouri.
Mhm.
Oh, that
Of a
one.
young boy that's commonly known as Roland Doe.
Oh boy, here we go.
So he underwent an extended period of brutal exorcism of the demonic spirits in that were possessing his body. And then news articles based about this story would later reach a man by the name of William Peter Blatty, and would form the inspiration for a little book and movie that you guys may have heard of called The Exorcist.
Okay.
Now, Roland Doe's experiences started when his spiritualist aunt first taught him how to use a Ouija board, and then the aunt died, and the mom was convinced that the aunt had left the money. They couldn't find it. So let's break out the Ouija board and talk to the aunt to try and find out where it is.
Try to find out where the money is.
Yep.
Where's the money?
Which quickly degenerated to
Trying to rob a
the
spirit.
demon, and it wasn't the aunt, it was the demon, carving words into the kid's chest to answer questions.
Oh my god.
They were living in Washington, D.C. It carved Lewis into his chest, which she interpreted to mean St. Louis, so she uprooted her family and moved to St. Louis.
So is Reagan based on
Yeah.
that
Yes.
person? Okay.
Okay.
And for a quick note on that, the movie is extremely accurate. Everything you see happen in the movie does happen during cases, except for the head spinning around.
Which is physically impossible.
So the green
Yeah.
slime thing happens?
Oh yeah, that can happen to you without being possessed. It's actually called projectile vomiting.
Yeah. You throw up bile, which is usually greenish.
And I've talked to EMTs that have seen people projectile vomit over little children vomit over an ambulance. It can get that kind of
Over an
distance.
ambulance?
Mhm.
Wow.
And this isn't possession. This is actual, real medical phenomenon.
That's some muscle power there.
I was gonna say I've had an experience with projectile vomit. Not over an ambulance, but it got some hang time. It was probably it was my first hangover.
I have a question. How do you feel about what's your stance on Amityville?
Amityville was real. I was very
Just
lucky.
talk to some of the people.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
So I was very lucky that we did back in the old days when I did the Lou Gentili show. Lou was the last student of Ed and Lorraine Warren before I sadly passed away in 2006. For those of you who don't know, Ed and Lorraine Warren, aside from being the inspiration for the 2 Conjuring movies
And Annabelle.
and Annabelle, well, the less said about the Annabelle movie, the better.
It sucks.
Yeah.
But they're
And
also
actually-
the investigators on the Amityville.
But the doll is real, apparently.
Yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
I've seen pictures of
It's
it.
a Raggedy Ann doll, which when
Yeah.
you read it, that this thing stood on its own accord, and
Yeah.
you realize, wait, it's a Raggedy Ann doll.
It doesn't
You,
have.
you
yeah.
remember
More
that's
creepy.
not physically possible.
And that
So-
doll is big. That's a big doll.
Here's
Yes,
the
it
thing.
is.
We had a gentleman on the show called Rick Osuna who had written a book about a brand new theory about what really happened the night the murders that happened in the house. So we have him on, and he says the Amityville Horror is a hoax. It didn't happen. And the murderer didn't kill everybody. His sister killed some of them. And within weeks of having him on, people start coming out of the woodwork. We get contacted by George Letts, the father from the movie and the book. No, the actual person, obviously. Chris Lutz, one of the 3 kids. Kathy Lutz, his wife, the 2 of them have since been divorced. The first reporter on the scene of the murders, who was a longtime friend of Anne Lorraine Warren. Lorraine, of course, chimes in. Most bizarrely, we got a letter from Ronald DeFeo himself, the murderer, in writing from prison. And having spoken to the people that lived through the experience. And if anyone's interested, you can look up Amityville Horror Week on YouTube. You can hear the interviews and hear what happened to George and Chris and Kathy in their own words.
And how terrifying.
They're still terrified of what happened to them in that house. It was exaggerated. It was blown. The book and especially the movie blow it out of proportion.
When you're filming something, apparently it's not impressive enough to float 6 inches from the bed. You have to do it like 6 feet. Never mind that you're floating above the bed.
It's the shock value.
The other big
Forget that you're levitating. If it's 6 inches, that's light work.
The other big change is that
Wrong show, man.
No.
The ghost.
that
The
in
show's
the
being
movie,
possessed.
in the book,
Yeah, ghost named Gino.
they live in the house for 28 days, and everything happens over the course of 28 days. Now, they lived in the house for 28 days, and everybody's usual response to the movie and the book, their story is, why didn't you move? The truth is, it didn't happen over the course of the entire time they were there. It happened everything happened in a week, the last week before they moved out. But Jane Anson, the man who wrote the book, and the producers of the movie felt for story purposes, it made more sense to have it over a month. People just weren't going to believe it happened all
Spread it out. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and plus, if you know anything, if you've ever been through a movie, it takes time to move.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you've got a fire under you and you want to get out, it takes time.
Well, actually, the way they didn't take long, because ultimately what they wound up doing, and this is a big thing about their credibility, because there are photographs from reporters and things like that that prove that they left everything they owned in that house, and they went and lived sleeping on mattresses on the floor in the one's mother's house.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, we planned to move. It was we ran.
We got
Oh yeah.
out as soon as we could.
Yeah. And that's
Wow.
that's more sensible.
Okay. So I'm actually a lot like you. I was into the conversation. I just wanted to see how long it would go, but
Yeah.
I'm like you with the whole skepticism because
Right.
other than like the experience with your mom,
Yeah.
I really haven't had much experience. Did I ever tell you about when people would say SPH was haunted back when I was up at school?
No.
Like especially
You
like
never
third
told me.
floor?
You never told me that was haunted.
Okay, the reason why I probably never did was because I myself never really had any experience. But I remember, and I actually talked about this on Jerry's show one time when she asked me like, "Hey, come on, join the show," like she does with almost everybody.
Everyone.
who walks in. That's classic
Because
Italian
Jerry's
woman
awesome.
right there.
Actually, I do it really with you, right?
I didn't know if it was just with me or
You
not.
do with everybody.
I know.
Okay.
Sophie.
Yes.
All right, but there was a couple of my friends actually one night who came from a different dorm.
Mhm.
I signed them in and everything, all well and good. I lived on what was supposedly the most haunted floor, the 3rd
Mhm.
floor at the time, and
And I've
you
been
know
to
we
that.
all hung out at my room. Before that, we were actually hanging out like right in the hall,
Mhm.
and they were telling me like how they felt like shivers down their spine, like they felt like the hair stand up, all that kind of stuff. They were like, "Can we go in your room? I'm really freaked out." I'm like, "What the hell is bothering you?"
Yeah.
Because nothing ever really happened to me when I was there.
Well, and it seems like there might be people that are more sensitive than others, and also you have people that just have really active imaginations that really want
Yeah.
to see something, and so they
Yeah.
will.
And as
They
an
will,
investigator,
you know.
a lot of the time, every investigator I know, myself included, has cases where it's not haunted. My favorite story, which didn't happen to me, it happened to my ex, who was also an investigator.
Oh, this one.
This is a fun
So
story.
she's an investigator in San Antonio, Texas.
Mhm.
And she's asked to go into your classic haunted house type of situation where apartment, ironically enough, across the street from where she lives, murder took place there.
Okay.
Ever since the murder, nobody will stay there more than a night or two. Convinced it's haunted.
Okay.
So it's San Antonio, which is not the nicest city necessarily. It's a bad part of town, and she's going at night. So she does the logical, sensible thing, being a female, a youngish, small woman going somewhere at night, and asks a guy to, not just a guy, but a former Navy SEAL paramedic to go with her.
Okay.
They go in the front door. They hear noises. Her response is the investigator response of, "Okay, let's figure out what that is." Not assuming it's a ghost, let's see if we can find an origin. His response is to turn around, run out the door, run all the way down the street, all the way back home, screaming like a little girl.
Oh my God.
It gets
Oh my
funnier.
God.
Yeah.
Because she found out what's going on. House isn't haunted. There's a family of raccoons living underneath the property.
Oh my God!
If you don't, anyone who doesn't know, Google sometimes raccoons. They make some really disturbing screaming noises and things like that.
Yeah.
So
It makes me
everybody
mad how the
everybody
small
thought that
woman
house-
didn't run the Navy SEAL
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah. The big macho
So everybody
guy
thought
that
that
turns
everybody
tail.
thought that was haunted because
Well,
of the size of the raccoons.
Yep.
In Texas and in many other places, New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut as well, for that matter, there's disclosure laws. If you're renting a property or selling a property where a murder is taking place, where there's a history of, or even just a reputation of being haunted, you have to tell prospective buyers or renters.
Yeah, because that affects the
Home
value.
value.
And then people's expectations sets in, and everything they hear
And they hear
suddenly
this
becomes
freaky
evidence
noise
of a ghost.
coming from like the floorboards all over the house, and they can't find a source because they don't go down, don't want to go downstairs, and they move out.
Crawl space or whatever.
But so she goes home. She picks up her phone. She calls the owners and goes, "Okay, you need an exterminate. You need pest control. You don't need an exorcist." A little while later,
This is one form of exorcism.
she's looking out the window, and she sees police lights out in the street. She goes, "Huh?" As many of us would do, she goes out the door to find out what's going on. She figures it out pretty quick. He's standing with his back to her, facing the house. The cops facing her. Friends of theirs are there. Turns out he ran home, called the cops, called their friends, told them that the house had eaten her.
Are you kidding me?
Oh my God.
Big
So-
former Navy SEAL.
Yep.
A house ate a human being. Okay.
She got 8.
So basically, she winds up walking up, and the cop sees her. And cop's pretty smart and figures out what's going on. It's like, "So can you describe your girlfriend?" The guy starts the description. The cop finishes it.
Turn around.
Yeah.
And she just walks up and goes, "Boo!" He jumped and screamed like a little girl.
Oh my God! I love it.
God bless our troops and all that. And I have the
Yeah.
utmost respect for SEALs. But and
That's
and
really
it's funny, and we make jokes about it, and I find it hysterical. I can't deny it. But the thing to realize, speaking from experience, when you're confronted by something you don't understand, your sense of what's real kind of goes out the window.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense.
It does create like a panic.
People have this, even in fact, in stress situations in general, like high stress situations in general, for normal people, I mean, the SEAL is obviously a different case,
Yeah.
but people's sense and logic and reason go out the window. People always, you watch horror movies and go, "You dumb blonde, why are you going upstairs when you should be going out the door?" It's like, no. When you're in a life or death situation, the normal response is to lose all sense of rationality and start doing things that make no bloody sense.
Well, and also you're going to head for a place that you feel safe.
Yeah.
Your instinct is, I feel safe in my home, in my bedroom.
You go to upstairs.
I'm going to run for
Yeah.
that.
I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just really want to point this out. I bet he's the biggest macho man when he's on the battlefield. And just imagine
He's a
that.
SEAL, I don't doubt it.
Here's the thing to realize too is that a lot of people who are acting tough. It's like, yeah, you're tough when you have a physical presence or a physical being to deal with.
You can
yeah.
punch an enemy soldier. You can't punch a ghost.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
kind of hard
when
to
you're
do.
doing with something that you can't physically fight, What are you gonna do?
Not to mention, I'll bet at the bar when he's had a few drinks in him, that story gets told very differently.
He actually thinks he's punching the ghost when he's in the bar.
Oh yeah, he's like, I took down that ghost, single-handedly. I went in and I kicked it.
If you get eaten by this house, I'm sorry. Let me go take a few shots of tequila down, and I'll just go beat the shit out of everything in this house.
There's a few. Funny enough, the eating by a house, well, not exactly, isn't as far-fetched as it sounds.
Tell me you haven't eaten by a house story. Really?
I'm surprised I haven't eaten one.
I've actually run into a few reliable accounts of the real spirits seem to be able to, on a rare occasion, make people vanish and not come back.
That's insane.
Very, it's really, really rare, and it's
good for that.
It's
yeah.
This is those times when it's like, okay, we're not talking about an imp, we're talking about one of the big boys.
Don't vanish by a ghost, okay?
You'll vanish, you'll never come back, or I've seen it speculated that they may be behind some cases of spontaneous human combustion as well.
Oh wow!
But again, this is ridiculous. I've never seen a case like that. I've only read a handful of reasonably reliable reports.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So there's still your vampire books we have to talk about.
Yes,
I want you to talk about that
much easier topic, much less creepy.
They're sitting there,
They're
so
sitting
we
right
gotta
there.
talk about them.
Okay. Yeah. So this is.
Girls are really good.
He read one, so he.
I really want to read the gangster one.
Okay. I have copies. I'll give you a better deal on it than you can get from like Amazon.
Okay.
Great, cool.
But I started writing way back when I was a kid. Like I've always known that I wanted to be a writer. For a brief period, I kind of went back and forth between I want to be an actor and I want to be a writer. Eventually, I decided I was a better writer than I was an actor, so I kind of settled on that. But yeah, the first book I ever wrote that completed was Ancient Blood, which is the first one. That's about a guy named Avery Doyle that's like a big vampire fan, loves the genre, loves the movies and all that stuff. So he meets a real vampire.
Did you think of yourself when you wrote this at all?
I kind of did. Yeah, I based not that I made him exactly me, but it was sort of like when I needed to think, okay, what would a real like normal guy do in this situation as opposed to a cool like character in a book. I thought, okay, what would I actually do? And in most cases it's I would like, rail and feel bad and curse life for being so unfair and what like I am not heroic and I was like, I want to put that in the book. I want to have a story about a guy that is not anybody's idea of a hero. He does grow. He does like go on a journey and become a better guy, but he's an ordinary
story is without growth.
Yeah, he's a ordinary schmuck, when the story starts. And he thinks becoming a vampire is going to be the answer to all his dreams.
Okay.
And it's not. It's totally not. Yeah, he winds up having the same problems just as a vampire.
Real quick, since we're running low on time.
Okay, yeah. The other one, the gangster one is fun. That's where the vampires.
Maria likes.
Yeah, the vampires pick a gangland hitman from the 1930s and bring him over because they think, well, you're going to make an excellent vampire. You're already halfway there. So, and he's like, sure, this sounds awesome. And
gotcha.
Yeah. So Vampire Fanboy becomes a vampire. Vampire gang members, and one of my favorites from the introduction of this, Vampire at Overeaters Anonymous.
Okay.
Yeah, that's later on. Avery goes to an Overeaters Anonymous meeting.
All right, we're gonna get into. Can I do this announcement first?
Sure.
What's the announcement?
It's a boxing fight.
Okay. Well,
right,
do that,
so-
and we'll do sponsors.
So Primal Gym, Jim McCann, we talk about it all the time. Danny from DJ Danny takes self-defense classes with him. They are having an amateur boxing fight Saturday, January 20th, 2018. Doors open at 5. Fight time is at 6. It's Scrappy Chenard Bunch versus Philly's own Kevin Serrano. So come check it out.
Check it out. And also, we're also giving away 10 tickets for Matt Bridgestone's Comedy Club in AC. Make sure you go to www.acjokes.com and pick the date and show. And to all our Hamilton Radio listeners, we're now a reseller for Amazon, Walmart, Best Buy, System Mechanic, and a bunch more. The list goes on. We got a bunch of links on hamiltonradio.net where you can go shop. Just click whichever link you want and get whatever you need through there. A portion of the proceeds go to Hamilton Radio. Thank you guys in advance for keeping the lights on, of course. And also to go out, we got to make sure we do the grub of the week, especially because Jerry's here. She loves this show just for the food, so we have to do it.
This isn't even something that you eat.
She's bringing my vegan food next week. She'll be fine.
Next week.
Yeah.
If she won't eat it, I'll finish it.
It was actually kind of funny because we both had the same idea. We both got cheese sticks from Pizza Hut. I just had one box that I saved for the show and ate the other one, and he brought 2 boxes of it.
I worked at Pizza Hut, so I brought a few over.
I put a lot of Parmesan cheese on it, just so you know.
Yes, that's good.
Parmesan cheese.
You understand.
Yeah.
The Ghost of Elvis to show up.
Okay.
We got the Ghost of Elvis.
Thank you very much, Elvis. Thank you.
Ghost of Elvis is our show in 2 weeks.
Oh, that'd be dope.
He does, yeah. He has
Imagine
a guy
just
who wrote
having
a
him
book.
playing it.
We're having an author on who wrote a book that goes to country music, and yes, he has a couple of stories about Elvis.
Oh,
There we
cool.
go.
That's awesome.
We could have a guest Elvis.
That'd be dope too. But anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. We gotta let Wisecracking with Jerry, the Elvis guy, and Frank Perry on. So we will
Thank
see
you
you
for having
guys
us.
next week when Jerry's on with all her vegan food and probably a bunch of other things.
Merry Christmas.
So make sure you tune in. Merry Christmas, guys.
Okay, you're clear.
All right.
Right on time, too.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Hope you guys have fun.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh yeah. It was nice not to have to carry the whole show. You
Yeah.
know?
Oh,
Yes.
I can imagine.
It's so much less stressful to be the guest.